Shields up, Iron Breakers. Rurikhan here coming at you with another video, and today we're going to be talking about Outriders. More specifically, I'm going to be going in depth into my thoughts and opinions on the Outriders demo that released earlier this week. Now, I played the demo on the PlayStation 5, so everything that I say on this video is going to be based around the PlayStation 5 version, so your mileage can and most likely will vary depending on which platform you played it on. Therefore, if you experience the problem that I did not talk about in this video, it just means that probably I did not experience that problem playing on PlayStation 5. So, let's get started. What are my initial thoughts on Outriders? Well, I was actually positively surprised. Like, I had seen the gameplay, I had seen some of the cinematics, I've seen the promotional material that pretty much everyone has seen, I've seen the broadcasts, all of these things. And, you know, I was curious. But after having played the demo, I am interested. So it's a little bit of an upgrade. That's not to say that, oh my god, it completely blew my mind, I can't wait to play it. No, it's more like, yeah, I definitely want to check it out. I want to play more, and I want to see what the actual final product feels like, because if the demo is any indication, I think it's actually going to be pretty good. So, as per usual with my videos, we're going to start things off with visuals, then sound, then gameplay, and then we're even going to touch up on a little bit of the story, despite the fact that, you know, there's not a whole lot to really talk about. The story that they mentioned, that we experience in this demo, is kind of like the story that they talk about in the promotional material that they've shown up until this point. Now, in terms of visuals, I thought they were pretty good. They're not necessarily groundbreaking, but they got the job done. They got me immersed into the world, and at no point was I like taken aback by, oh, this texture looks horrible, or oh, this section of the game looks really bad, or the lighting is wrong. Like, I didn't really experience any of that, which is why I thought it was pretty surprising when during my live stream a lot of people were saying they thought the game looked really bad. And also in the comment sections of that live stream, I've seen a couple of comments of people saying the game looked dated, and I'm just like, I don't really see it. I don't really agree. But, you know, to each his own. Maybe that particular visual style is not for you, but I thought it looked pretty good. Even from a fidelity standpoint, like, I think the PS5 is running it at either 4K or 2K. Unfortunately, I can't really tell. I don't have the tools from friggin' Digital Foundry, so I'm sorry about that. But I thought it looked pretty damn good, and it was running at a smooth 60 FPS throughout the whole experience on PlayStation 5, so that was pretty good. There were a couple of exceptions on cinematics, which we'll talk about when I get to cinematics. Now, in terms of animations, this was a complaint that I already had before I even went into the game, because I had seen the promotional material, I had seen the animations on the attacks of the classes and whatnot, and I already thought that the animations could do with a little bit more impact. But, you know, once I actually got into the game, I'm like, yeah, these animations could do with more impact. They don't really give you that oomph, like, right? Like when you're playing, for instance, Moss on a World, and you get that true charge slash, like, you really feel that smacking into the monster, right? And, you know, there's a lot of moments that should feel like that in Outriders, and they don't. But at the same time, this is one of those situations where it definitely feels better when you're playing it than when you're looking at it. Because I remember looking at the footage and it kind of bothering me, like the gameplay footage before I actually got to play the game, and I was like, man, those animations, they really need more oomph to them, right? But once I actually played the game, it wasn't as much of a problem, because you're concerned with so many different things, shooting enemies, or my power's off cooldown, whatnot, that the animation thing didn't really bother me as much. Now, again, this is one of those situations where your mileage may vary depending on each individual player, but to me, it didn't bother me as much as I expected. Now, having said that, there is one thing that I think is very important, and I believe that developers already mentioned that this is going to be something that you'll be able to turn off on PC, and that is the running motion blur. You guys really got to fix that. You got to be able to turn that clean off, and not just on PC either. We want to be able to turn that crap off in consoles as well, okay? Because I don't understand how in 2021 there's still people putting out motion blur as a default option with no option to turn it off, okay? Like, seriously, a big majority of gamers does not want to play with motion blur on, so either make motion blur by default off and then have an on thing, or let us turn it off from the get-go. Having forced motion blur is actually something that bothers me a little bit. Like, I don't even mind it as much as other people, it's just the amount of it needs to be tuned significantly less than what it is right now. But, you know, One thing that really surprised me when it came to visuals were the cinematics, because you kind of expect when it's a looter game, you already have this this expectation that, these cinematics are not going to be that great. The story's not really going to be, something that we care that much about. And that was a huge surprise, because I thought that the cinematics were actually really polished. The animations on the characters were pretty good. The lip syncing overall was also pretty good. And it kind of really got me invested in the story of this game, which is something that I initially did not expect. And I know that some people are going to be like, oh, I mean, did you really think the animations were freaking amazing? I thought they were a lot better than what I was expecting, right? And that got me more invested in it, got me more invested in the world, got me to be more immersed into the world of Outriders. And I thought that was a really good surprise. However, these cutscenes also had some serious problems on the PlayStation 5. Like, I would say 60 to 70% of the cutscenes that I saw on the game, and I've played through the demo twice at this point, 60 to 70% of those cutscenes had audio desync issues. And I've heard that there were also problems with this stuff on PC, so you guys really need to look into this audio desync situation and make sure that does not go into the final game, because those instantly take you out of the experience. Like, you did a really good job with the animations and whatnot, and whenever the audio went to crap, that took me immediately out of the game. It's not like a deal breaker, but it is something that if they fixed it, the experience would be way better. And now let's also talk about the frame rate situation. I really don't understand the logic behind this, and if anybody comes at me with like, oh yeah, we did it that way because it was more cinematic, I will slap that person in the face, okay? You tell me which one of your developers or artists thought that like, oh man, we'll totally do gameplay at 60 FPS, but then we'll cut it down to like 24 or 30 for the cutscenes, dude. It's gonna be so much more cinematic. I will literally slap this person in the face, okay? Cutting the frames down in a cinematic does not make it more cinematic. Quite the opposite, because you're accustomed to seeing a certain frame rate, and then when that frame rate gets chopped in half out of nowhere, it is jarring to the point where I'd almost rather play the game at I wouldn't. I would still rather play the game at 60, but please fix the frame rate on those cutscenes, because it's completely, that is actually almost a deal breaker. That is pretty close. Like, it bothered me that much. But then again, the quality of the cutscenes kind of made up for it a little bit, so And then another thing, and this one has to go. Like, I don't care what you guys have to do, but the Hollywood shaky camera situation in the cutscenes, nah, dude, that is not the way. Okay, it almost looks like you guys ran this through some kind of an AI to simulate shaky camera in cutscenes, and I don't know, or maybe whoever was operating the camera had some kind of a problem, but like the camera is going like this, Actually, I just realized that I'm looking at a camera and I'm only making a recording because I'm an idiot. But basically the camera is jittery as all hell, which, I get it, it's to simulate. I seem to remember the first movie that I saw like this was the first Jason Bourne movie. And I was just like, dude, this is terrible. I hated a lot of scenes in that movie because like, the camera is just like filming all over the goddamn place. This is crazy. So seriously, fix the shaky camera situation, please. Like that actually takes me really away from, it's almost like you have these cutscenes that are really well made, and then you have the audio desync and the shaky camera and the low frame rate situation. If you don't fix all of those, I feel like that is a serious problem for your product on the 1st of April. And I already know that there was a tweet where they said, we don't know what to do about the shaky camera. And I'm just like, you shouldn't have done it in the first place. Video games don't necessarily need a shaky camera in cutscenes. Remember Mass Effect? Nobody complained. I think at least in Mass Effect 1 and Mass Effect 2, not a single person was complaining, man, I wish that in these dialogue scenes, the camera was shaking. Right? I don't think any gamers ever complained, man, I would be so much more immersed if the camera was shaking. It's a video game, not a movie. We don't need shaky camera. And your game looks really good, and the shaky camera actually makes it look worse. So I don't know. I don't know what to tell you about that. Now, I wanted to talk a little bit about the sound, because for some strange reason, I don't know exactly what is going on here, because I asked other people that played the game if they noticed anything exceptional about the sound, and people told me no, nothing in particular, but to me, the sound was really, really good. In terms of like positional audio, in terms of just like the balancing of the different sounds, even in the voice acted cutscenes, the sound, it just sounded really good, and it got me thinking back to like the GDC presentation for PlayStation 5, where they talked about we have this specific thing that we did for the sound of PlayStation 5, and most of the people that I talked to, they played it on a different platform. And so I'm wondering if this sound thing is they're using some kind of PlayStation technology to get it to work better, which would be surprising, but I don't know. There's just something about the sound in Outriders that really stood out to me as really, really good. With the exception of the shotgun sounds. I didn't like those. Shotgun sounds actually kind of sounded lame. But like just sound in general sounded very, very good. Now I'm going to briefly tell you my opinions on the story. There's not going to be any spoilers or anything like that. But I was very engaged by this story. So this is a story where, the theme is like, oh, Earth is overly polluted, or we destroyed it, or, some kind of like, we finally went too far with pollution and stuff like that. And now we're moving away. We're going to this new planet. And there's just always something about going to a new planet that just awakens the explorer in me. I just feel like I'm kind of biased to this type of story theme. I mean, if you look at one of my favorite exploration game of all times is Xenoblade Chronicles X, and you're just like on planet Myra exploring and doing all these crazy things. And I seem to have a specific bias when it comes to exploration of new planets. So, the theme around the Outriders is something that I actually greatly enjoyed. And I also appreciate the fact that the main character, he's basically a mercenary, and he actually acts like a mercenary, because a lot of video games you have your protagonist, your protagonist is a mercenary, because you can kind of have an imagination and give yourself a background for a mercenary. Anyone can kind of like have a mercenary type background, right? But then when you actually get into the game and dialogue choices and you see your character speak, usually you can be just a goody two-shoes, like, oh yeah, I'm a mercenary, but let's all be friends, let's all have fun, and I want to make sure that everybody gets out of this life. Our character actually talks like a mercenary, and that was pretty refreshing. Like, there's a cutscene in a side quest where there's another soldier bleeding from a leg wound, and your character just goes like, so you need a medic or something? The other character's like, no. He's like, okay, and he just moves on, right? It's good that the character actually seems to make sense, and it contributes a great deal to my immersion in the game. So yeah, the story turned out to be one of the highlights for me. I really, really liked it. Anyway, let's touch up on what really matters, and that is the gameplay. And the gameplay of Outriders is fun. It's not necessarily groundbreaking, but I still greatly enjoyed it. And what do I mean by that? I mean that this game isn't necessarily doing anything that you haven't really seen before. You have your two main weapons and a sidearm. You use those to shoot enemies. Enemies die, you kill more enemies, and you advance onwards with the story. Besides your weapons, you also have your special powers, which can also be comboed in between themselves to achieve devastating results depending on the class that you're using and the abilities that you're using, and also in the build that you'll be able to do. Now, we couldn't really experiment too much with builds because we only had access to 4 out of the 8 possible skills you can have in a character, and you only had 2 class points, and your class tree is friggin' ginormous, so there's going to be a lot of room for experimentation there in the final product. But ultimately, this was a demo, so I don't necessarily expect to get the gist of the entirety of what you'll be able to do with the gameplay. But ultimately, again, this isn't really something we haven't seen before. You have 3 special powers, 3 weapons, you shoot and kill a bunch of enemies, and you advance the story, you do boss fights, you get loot, you upgrade your character with that loot, and then you break down the loot that you don't need. But the things that are there seem to be well thought out. It's not like, for instance, when you were playing Anthem at the very beginning, you're like, where's my stat screen? Why can't I change my gear when I'm in the middle of a quest? Why can't I identify my loot when I'm in the middle of a quest? You know, you don't seem to have those problems. Stuff just kind of works. I know there's a meme for that, but that's what I'm pointing out. You know, you go through. They figured out how to do an inventory system. They figured out how to get your character to equip your stuff while you're in the middle of combat. You know, the stuff that we come to take for granted in most games, it seems that the looter genre has kind of struggled a little bit with it, depending on which game we're talking about. So it's like the stuff that is there is solid and is fun. Now, one of my complaints would be, I wish hipfire felt better, because aiming down sights feels fine. So aim down the sights of your weapon. The game is obviously third person, but you can still aim down the sights of your weapon to get a little bit more precision and shoot. And shooting through, shooting when you're aiming down sights feels fine, but shooting from the hip does not feel particularly good, at least in my opinion. Regardless of which weapon I'm firing, like whether it's a shotgun, a pistol, a machine gun, it just feels weird. Feels like it lacks feedback, visual feedback, hit markers. I don't know. There's just something that is not there with the hipfire. And to be honest, this is the type of game that I really don't want to spend too much time aiming down sights, because that just gets in the way of me using my powers. I just want to be spamming powers nonstop as much as I can, and any shooting that I do, I would rather it be much more from the hip than necessarily aiming down sights. And I wish they would polish up hip fire a little bit more to feel a little bit better. What I can tell you is that I tested both playing the demo completely solo. I did the whole demo solo, and then I did the entirety of the demo pretty much in multiplayer, and I did, I think I did all of the side quests that were in the demo as well. And multiplayer definitely felt a lot more fun. But then again, you know, you can say that about almost any game where, you know, you're playing with your friends. It feels a lot more fun. But it felt particularly more so in this game because you feel like you get way more openings to utilize your powers and engage in devastating combos when there's 2 players there, because you can take more chances. Whereas if you're playing solo, you have to play a little bit more conservatively, because if you die, you have to basically restart. Whereas, you know, if you got 2 players, for starters, there's more targets for the enemies to shoot at, which actually makes it feel significantly better, because when I was playing solo with the Pyromancer, it felt like every single shot the enemies were taking would hit me. And I was like, this almost feels like hit scan at this point. Like, what the hell is going on? So, you know, having 2 players there, there's more targets for them to shoot at, which gives you more openings to use your powers and feels a lot more fun. Particularly because your friends are also using their own powers, and combining all of that stuff feels great. Like, I was playing with Kegger, and he had a Trickster, and he would do like his AoE time-slowing dome thing, and I would just like jump back and then jump into the action as a Devastator and just destroy everything. I also tested out 2 different classes, and I'll tell you right now that classes actually feel a lot different depending on which class you're playing. So playing the Pyromancer, for instance, I figured that, hey, if I have enough equipment, I can still play it almost as a tanky type of class. No, you can't. At least I couldn't, because the Pyromancer felt like he was made out of paper. And even without using powers, I felt like with the Devastator, I could just run up to the enemies and blast them in the face. Whereas with the Pyromancer, I felt like the second I peek my head out, someone's going to blast it off. So, yeah, it was very, very different. And this is a good thing, by the way. I'm not complaining. I'm saying this is a good thing, the fact that classes feel so different and provide you with a very different playstyle. But this was my personal experience with it. I'm not saying that once you actually get the end game that they're still going to feel so different. But early on, and with the difficulty level of the demo, I definitely felt like Devastator is much more my speed than Pyromancer. But Pyromancer is also incredibly fun, and the powers that you can do with the Pyromancer are very satisfying. Like, you can blow up a dude and then have that dude deal AoE damage to every dude that's around him, and that feels incredibly satisfying. But on the other hand, with Devastator, you can just like put up a shield, soak up all the bullets, and then shoot them back, which was something that initially I thought didn't look that great and didn't look that appealing, but once I was actually doing it, it felt fantastic. So again, it's one of those situations, like I mentioned at the start of the video, it feels better than it looks. But you know, those are my initial impressions. I enjoyed it. I'm not telling you guys to go out and buy it because, again, this is a demo and this is a genre right now where we've had quite a few disappointments. So obviously you should be hesitant as to how you spend your money, particularly during this pandemic. But I will say that you should at least check out the demo because it's free, and you know, at least that is one of the things that I actually really appreciate about the developers of Outriders, is the fact that they even said it themselves, like, look guys, this is not a beta, this is a demo, so you can clearly play this, and if you don't like this, that means you're not going to like the final product. But if you do like this, there's a high chance you're also going to like the final product. And I can appreciate that, you know? The fact that they were upfront about it and they just have this full demo. The demo's not going to go away after the game releases. So even if you're like, well, I'm not going to have any time to play this right now, you can pick up that demo like 3 months from now. Because ultimately, this is not a live service game. At least this is what they said. They specifically said, not a live service. This is a full game. The biggest downside that this game has is the fact that you have to be online. I don't really understand that decision because this isn't even like an MMO light type of situation. Sure, there's matchmaking and people can matchmake into your match. Like I even did that by mistake, as in I was playing with Kegrin and then suddenly a random person joined into our match because I forgot to close the lobby and I was like, huh, okay. But I don't know. I just see this as a game for you to play more with friends than necessarily as an MMO light. But still, the option is there. I just wish that they had done the options like, hey, you want to play solo? Boom, here you go. You want to play in LAN, for instance? That's another option that I would have liked to have for this game. You know, just have a local type thing that doesn't require to be on the internet. I wish more games actually did that nowadays. LAN over online, because I just have this weird sinking feeling that one of these days the ISPs are finally going to have their way and the internet is not going to be as we see it, but that's just like conspiracy theory, Rurikhan. But anyway, ultimately, I feel like the conclusion of this is playing the demo made me more interested in playing the final game, significantly more interested in playing it than I was before I played the demo, because I did enjoy my time with it, and I want to at least play through the main story. But ultimately, I've seen a lot of people talk about how they expect this to replace something like a Destiny or, you know, those types of live service games. And I just feel like that's not the expectation that I personally have for this game. Like, I would expect to maybe get 100 hours out of it. And then if I really enjoy the end game, maybe twice that. But this is one of those games that you play and you eventually put down. That's the way that I look at it. I don't see this as a live service game, and I'm glad that it's not, because not every friggin' game needs to be a live service battle pass piece of garbage, you know? I don't want to feel like it's a chore to play every single game that comes out nowadays. I'm fine with playing a video game and then eventually putting it down and moving on to something else. I think that, you know, more games should be like that, if anything. And finally, I don't think that every game needs to be a groundbreaking experience, so long as it's a solid one. And that's one of the things that I think this demo was. I think it was pretty solid in most things, minus the stuff that I criticized, like I wish the hipfire was better. I wish that they didn't have the cinematic problems where frame rate goes from 60 to 24 or 30 or whatever the hell, the cinematic shaky camera, and the audio desync stuff. If they can sort that cinematic stuff out, maybe improve the hipfire mechanics a little bit, I think that there's a really good game here. But those are just my thoughts. Let me know what you guys think about it in the comment section down below. Thank you all very much for watching. If you enjoyed this video, hit the like button. If you did not enjoy the video, hit the dislike button. Feedback is important. If you usually enjoy my content, subscribe, bell notification icon, all of that stuff. And I'll see you in the next one. Stay strong, stay safe, peace out.